Chapter-7. Renee. It felt weird driving his truck, not because she couldn't, but because it felt oddly intimate, like they were dating. Not that she wouldn't mind dating him, and of course it couldn't be helped. He couldn't leave his truck there with no way to get back to it, and she needed to get back to the hospital to get her car. But if anyone saw her driving his truck, it would definitely fuel some rumors. She hoped he was ready for them. The ambulances were still parked outside the emergency room doors when she pulled in, but as she hadn't been far behind them, she didn't think they'd be there much longer. She pulled into a space and made sure to lock the truck before heading in. The hospital was a safe place most of the time, but it would be just her luck that Garrett's truck would get stolen if she left it unlocked. The ER was bustling with its usual activity as she stepped inside. Riley loved the nonstop action, but Renee would be exhausted if she had to work there every day. She was exhausted just watching them run back and forth across the room, and she wondered if the nurses ever got to sit down. "Are you on tonight, Renee?" The voice came from Anne, the head nurse. She was not quite as formidable as Yolanda, but she was close. At nearly 6 feet and with fiery red hair that she kept pulled back in a tight ponytail, she was definitely imposing. Her green eyes were sharp, and it always felt a little like she was trying to see into your soul when she looked at you. But she was nice. Mostly. "No, I was with Dr. Young at the accident that just came in. Any word on the victims?" Anne pursed her lips. Normally, Anne would tell her nothing, as she wasn't family, but Renee had been on scene, and that made it different. "Mom is about to go in for x-rays. Baby seems okay, but Dr. Young is still assessing her in room 4. "And the teenagers?" Renee almost didn't want to ask. They'd clearly been drinking, and while that sometimes helped a body stay relaxed in an accident, it could lead to a lot of other issues. Anne shook her head. "Nothing yet. They're still being examined." Renee had been hoping for better news, but it was what she had expected. "Thank you. Can I go see Dr. Young?" Anne motioned for her to go ahead before she hurried off to divert another disaster. That woman must survive on caffeine and energy drinks. Renee began to make her way to room 4, dodging a gurney and 2 nurses. But before she reached the curtain, a hand landed on her arm and the smell of alcohol filled her nose. "Can I just get some coffee?" the man asked, his words slurring. Renee looked around for some help as she didn't know where this man was supposed to be, nor did she think they were handing out coffee in the ER. "Edward, there you are. You've got to stay in your room." A nurse that Renee didn't recognize appeared and grabbed onto the drunk man's arm. Renee flashed her a grateful look as she led him away. This place was hectic. She would take her pediatric floor any day. With a sigh of relief, she pulled open the curtain to room 4 and Garrett looked up. "Oh, good. You made it. I guess the truck didn't give you any issues." Issues? His truck seemed fairly new. What issues could it have? "Not a one. Does it give you issues?" He shrugged. "Sometimes, in the mornings when it's cold." "Well, that's like every car ever. How's the baby?" "She looks good." He returned his attention to the baby. "The wonder of car seats will never cease to amaze me. I don't think she even suffered a bruise." The image of the mangled car flashed into Renee's mind, causing her to shudder. It really was amazing that the baby hadn't been injured. "That's good to hear. The head nurse said Mom is getting x-rays?" "Yeah, they wanted to be sure there were no surprises with her head wound, but they sounded optimistic that her injuries were minor and she'd make a full recovery." God is good. A soft sigh spilled from her lips as her gaze traveled to the ceiling. Renee knew God wasn't in the ceiling, and honestly, she wasn't even sure heaven was in the sky. But it was what she was taught growing up, and it was a familiar and comforting motion. Garrett smiled at her words and then gently lifted the baby. "Okay, little one, let's get you settled in with a nurse until your mommy returns." He grabbed the carrier that she hadn't even noticed on the floor and placed the baby inside. The image was so sweet that Renee could almost hear her maternal clock ticking. He would make a great father. And now her cheeks felt like they were on fire. Hopefully he wouldn't notice. "Let me get her secured with a nurse and we can go," he said, hefting the carrier like it was no heavier than a box of tissues. It might not be that heavy to him, but it was weighty enough to make his bicep bulge and her eyes fixated on the sight. "You okay?" "What? Oh, yeah, I'm fine." Except for the fact that she had not only ogled her coworker, but also pictured him as the father of her children in the last 5 minutes. "You sure? Your face looks a little red." The corners of his lips quirked up just enough that she realized he was teasing her. He might not know what was in her head, but he clearly caught her salivating over his muscles. It was not a good look for her. "I'm fine. It's just hot in here." That was not a lie. The pediatric floor was almost always a comfortable 70 degrees, but the ER was stifling. It was probably due to the sheer number of bodies shoved in there and the fact that most of them were constantly moving. But it was one more reason Renee was glad she didn't work there daily. "Yeah, it is. Okay, let's get her situated and get out of here." It took a moment to find a free nurse and for Garrett to rattle off the information, but finally they headed out the ER doors and back into the cooler night air. Renee handed him the truck keys. "Well, that was eventful, wasn't it?" he asked, as she led the way to where she parked. "That's how it is around here sometimes." "But not always, right? I was kind of hoping for a slower pace when I left Chicago." "Why did you leave Chicago?" She shot a side glance at him as she posed the question. He tensed, only for a minute, but it made her curious. "My life in Chicago was pretty messy. I didn't let God lead, and so when I had the opportunity to start fresh, I took it. He led me here. It helped that my brother lives here too." "I know how that goes. I left Texas for pretty much the same reason. I'm really glad he led you here." They hadn't gotten to talk much in the last few days, but it hadn't dulled her attraction to him one bit. As she looked at him now, she couldn't help wondering what it would be like to kiss him. His lips were thin, but not so thin they seemed to disappear like some men's did, and they looked so soft and kissable. "Me too." He stared at her for a moment and pressed his lips together. Was he going to ask her out? "Would you like a ride to your car?" Renee swallowed her disappointment and shook her head. "No, I'm just parked over there. I'll be fine. See you tomorrow?" "Absolutely." As Renee walked to her car, doubts surfaced in her mind. Was she misreading the situation with Garrett? There were definitely times when he looked at her that he seemed interested, but maybe not. Maybe she was seeing it because she wanted to be seeing it, and not because it was really there. "Lord, please show me what to do."